But here's why we're watching so very carefully after President Obama again, and he has done it more than a few times, launched against Donald Trump yesterday in what some are calling a tirade, a tantrum about the uses of the words radical Islamism and so much more. The president ripped into the presumptive Republican nominee in that speech that critics, again, are questioning whether or not that was even leadership by President Obama for his response to the Orlando terror attack. He's rejecting calls to describe Muslim terrorists as radical Islamists. Here's a recap. Watch.
It's a political talking point. It's not a strategy. And the reason I am careful about how I describe this threat has nothing to do with political correctness and everything to do with actually defeating extremism. Now, up until this point, this argument about labels has mostly just been partisan rhetoric. And sadly, we've all become accustomed to that kind of partisanship, even when it involves the fight against these extremist groups. And that kind of yapping has not prevented folks across government from doing their jobs. We now have proposals from the presumptive Republican nominee for President of the United States to bar all Muslims from emigrating to America. We hear language that singles out immigrants and suggests entire religious communities are complicit in violence. Where does this stop?
Interesting to hear the president call the words yapping. Elected officials who might have dissenting views on how to fight the ISIS savages, he calls it yapping. Trump reacted to those comments at a rally last night. Here's that.
I watched President Obama today, and he was more angry at me than he was at the shooter. But he was more angry, and a lot of people have said this, the level of anger, that's the kind of anger he should have for the shooter and these killers that shouldn't be here.
Donald Trump is not the only one criticizing the president. New York Post columnist Michael Goodwin called it a temper tantrum and wrote, "It was a striking display of personal anger and pent-up grievances and a total failure of leadership during a national crisis. Obama's demeanor and tone were far from presidential. His cause is himself. Always and only. America saw Barack Obama at low tide yesterday, revealed as brimming with fury and bankrupt of ideas and even sympathy for the dead." End quote. Jedediah?
Yeah, there's an opportunity here for Donald Trump because there's a huge vacuum. We have no presidential commentary right now. President Obama looked like a campaigner. He looked like he was going after his political opponent instead of being a president and calling for the nation to come together. I would encourage Donald Trump to not stoop to that level and to actually provide what's missing here, which is some unity, and look presidential, because you have our president now who he does look like he's throwing a tantrum. He looks like he's on the campaign trail, and it's embarrassing, honestly, because in times like this, no matter where you stand on the political spectrum, you want to be able to look to your president and say, you know what, he got this right. He's calling for all of us to come together. He's not being divisive. He's not a campaigner. So Donald Trump, you know what, look at what's missing and be that for people, because you may be the guy who wins this thing, and that's what people need in times like this.
We watched that speech live yesterday.
Yeah.
We were sitting here, and it was amazing the way he had no emotion at the top. I mean, when he was talking about what had happened and going after ISIS, he was completely devoid of emotion.
Americans under siege.
Yes, and instead, he only got animated when he started to attack his political opponent. I mean, when is the last time we saw a sitting president get out there and attack the other party's candidate running in the next election? I mean, it just is beneath him. It should be.
And all right, so one of the things that was happening, you were watching on your phone Hillary Clinton giving a speech while we were carrying President Obama.
And thank you for bringing that up, because I want to run this by you, Judge, because Ambassador John Bolton was our #OneLuckyGuy sitting in your chair yesterday. He just tweeted out a few moments ago, as we do await these remarks by Donald Trump, he tweeted out, "Criticizing political opponents at a time when we need to focus on protecting the nation is beneath the dignity of the office of the president." He suggested, Judge, while he was sitting there yesterday, speaking of Hillary Clinton, said this would be an opportune time for her to diverge, to separate herself from the president and put out a more powerful message against the enemy. But would she even be willing to do that?
So before you speak up, I want to show everybody that that's exactly what didn't happen. That somehow or another, they were singing off the same song sheet. She had the day before mentioned the words radical Islamism, but it was disingenuous. Watch this.
So there's no magic to the phrase radical Islam. It's a political talking point. It's not a strategy.
He is fixated on the words radical Islam. Now, I must say I find this strange. Is Donald Trump suggesting that there are magic words that once uttered will stop terrorists from coming after us?
All right, so she mentioned them the day before, but then they somehow got together.
Yeah, I have a feeling that part of his anger might have been the fact that she deviated from what has been a unity between the two of them about not making anything of those magic words, as he calls them. The one thing that struck me was the difference between the speech he gave when Americans were slaughtered, basically, with terrorist ties, and the difference with other presidents who have given speeches when Americans have been attacked. Even George Bush, everybody remembers the speech he gave over by the fire truck after 9/11, a very powerful presidential speech that moved people. This was a speech that sounded like a child complaining. And the whole idea of the not using the words radical Islam, even Democrats are pulling away from that and going, why? He has no problem. I understand his theory, and I totally disagree with it, that, oh, if we use those words, we're maligning all Muslims because of a very small percentage. Well, guess what? He has no problem saying that these people are mentally ill, and they are, and we all agree with that. But you're maligning all the mentally ill, 99% of which would never do anything like this, and he knows that that doesn't make a difference, that you say this individual's mentally ill. The public is not going to go, oh, my God, we have to worry about people who have mental illness, and it's the same with
But if he really
Islam.
thought it were just mental illness, why did he then launch into his diatribe yesterday about all the things he's going to do against ISIS?
Because he has,
I mean, clearly there's some connection there.
Honestly, I think his anger this is projecting his anger from something else. It wasn't about this, because his diatribe, I think his anger is better placed on the fact that he has ignored the recommendations of generals over and over again throughout his entire term, and Americans are dying. They're dying because he has decided what his policy is going to be on dealing with ISIS, and the policy is I'm just going to ride this out and let somebody else be the wartime president, because I got the Nobel Peace Prize.
All right. Well, we will come back to that as it makes news today, no doubt. It is our breaking news story, what happened in Orlando. But